Photographs can give us a glimpse into the past and show us how scary it was. Hello everyone and welcome back to our channel. I'm your host Emily and today we're counting down our list of disturbing photos from history taken in prohibited places. Coming in at number 10 is Anne Frank's attic. For those of you who don't know, Anne Frank was a German-born Jewish girl who kept a diary in which she documented life in hiding from 1942 to 1944 during the German occupation of the Netherlands in World War II. She wrote every day in her diary about her life from her family's hiding place in an Amsterdam attic. Her diary was eventually published and it's now one of the world's best known books. Now this photo is not of Anne but of her father, Otto, in 1960 revisiting the attic where the family hid. He was the sole survivor of his family, so I can't imagine the pain he had revisiting this place. Later, the photographer Arnold Newman recalled taking this photo. He said, "The mood was depressing and I immediately began photographing him. After a few moments, the Westertoren bells next door began to ring. Those were the bells that Anne wrote about. He suddenly broke down completely, weeping uncontrollably, and then so did I. We never met again. To this day, when I lecture or tell his story to people, I find I choke up. I still can't help myself." Number 9. An inmate at the Rab camp. The Rab camp was one of several Italian concentration camps, and it was established during World War II in July 1942 on the Italian-occupied island of Rab, now in Croatia. Estimates of the Commission for Determining the Crimes of the Occupiers say 4,641 detainees died at the camp, including 800 inmates who died while being transported from Rab to other concentration camps in Italy. In July 1943, after the fall of the fascist regime in Italy, the camp was closed, but some of the remaining Jewish prisoners were deported by German forces to the extermination camps. Under Italian Army Commander Mario Rotado's watch, the ethnic cleansing and violence committed against the Slovene civilian population included summary executions, hostage-taking and ending the hostages' lives, reprisals, and the burning of houses and villages. Slovenes and Croatians suffered from cold and hunger in open-air tents, surrounded by barbed wire fence and guarded towers. At its peak, there were up to 15,000 internees. Conditions at the camp were described as appalling, filthy, muddy, overcrowded, and swarming with insects. This photo just shows how much suffering they went through. Number 8. A jail cell from the Salem witch trials. This makeshift jail cell truly brings out the horrors of the Salem witch trials. These trials were a series of hearings and prosecutions of people accused of witchcraft in colonial Massachusetts between February 1692 and May 1693. More than 200 people were accused, 30 people were found guilty, 19 of whom were executed by hanging. Now, women vastly outnumbered men in the ranks of accused and executed. It was in cells like this one that the accused witches spent their final moments before being executed. Now it's just sad because we all know that this was just a scare and that they weren't real witches. Many of these women were suspected and chosen because they were simply unliked. Number 7. Pyramids on the Moon. In 1972, this image was taken by Apollo 17 during its flight to the moon near an area known as Geophone Rock. NASA listed the image as blank, but after retouching the photo, you can see that it's not completely blank. Turning up the contrast, a pyramidal structure can be seen. So, what is it? Was it some malfunction of the camera, or is there actually a pyramid on the moon? NASA has never given a credible version of the issue, which has led to some speculations about what actually can be on the moon, hidden from the public. And listen, not to be a crazy conspiracy theorist, but maybe it is true that aliens built the pyramids on Earth as they look like they did it on the moon too. I don't know, but it gives you a lot to think about. While this eye looks like it may belong to a scary monster, it's actually a human eye. While rummaging through photographs that captured the devastating impact of the Hiroshima and Nagasaki, this photo emerged. On the 6th and 9th of August 1945, the United States detonated 2 atomic for the Japanese cities of Hiroshima and Nagasaki respectively. The aerial bombings together ended the lives between 129,000 and 226,000 people. People, most of whom were civilians. When the Detonated at 1,900 feet above the city center of Hiroshima. The subsequent explosion caused temperatures of 10,000 degrees Fahrenheit to annihilate nearly everything within 1,600 feet of the blast zone. Almost anything and anyone within a mile was destroyed. And heat were so extreme that they bleached the city's exposed surfaces, except in places where an unsuspecting person shielded the building or sidewalk or bridge from the blast with their own body in their final moments alive. Now, this is what the eye of an victim plagued by an atomic cataract looks like. While it had been a well-known fact that radiation causes cataracts in animals, the development of atomic cataracts in human beings was noted after the atomic in Japan. Now, it wasn't just this person who suffered from this, but many others as well. Number 5. The Babushka Lady. The woman in the brown coat, or the Babushka Lady as she was later called by the FBI, was very close to JFK when he was assassinated in Dallas. Traveling in a presidential motorcade through downtown Dallas, JFK was assassinated, hit once in the back and once in the head. Kennedy was taken to Parkland Hospital for emergency medical treatment, where he was pronounced dead 30 minutes later. Now, Lee Harvey Oswald was charged with Kennedy's assassination. He denied. Oswald then was as well soon after. These theories allege the involvement of the CIA, the Mafia, Vice President Lyndon B. Johnson, Cuban Prime Minister Fidel Castro, the KGB, or some combination. Now, according to eyewitnesses though, this woman, the Babushka Lady, filmed the entire thing. It's thought that from her vantage point, she may have been able to answer some critical questions about what really happened that day. However, the FBI was never able to track her down, and no one has since been able to figure out the identity of this mystery observer. Number 4. Human zoos. Yes, you might have thought that zoos were strictly for animals, but once upon a time there were human zoos, which I personally find disgusting. Now, this photo was taken in 1904, where the US government imported 1,300 indigenous Filipinos from different tribes to display at the St. Louis Exposition in 1904. Yeah, you heard that right. The government did this, but are we really that surprised? The zoos were public displays of people, usually in so-called natural or primitive state, to be seen and gawked at. These zoos were most prominent during the 19th and 20th centuries, and in the 1870s, exhibitions of so-called exotic populations became popular throughout the Western world. Human zoos could be seen in many of Europe's largest cities, such as Paris, Hamburg, London, Milan, as well as American cities such as New York City and Chicago. These people were zoo attractions among the monkeys and lizards to show off the new US possessions. These people were often bound by ropes and visitors threw peanuts at them. The treatment of these human beings was just awful. Number 3. The Dyatlov Pass incident. The Dyatlov Pass incident was an event in which 9 Soviet hikers died in the northern Ural Mountains between February 1st and 2nd, 1959, under uncertain circumstances. This creepy photo shows the determined group traversing the harsh terrain just before they met their fate on the night of February 1st. The experienced trekking group from the Ural Polytechnical Institute, led by Igor Dyatlov, had established a camp in the Russian SFSR of the Soviet Union. Now, overnight, something caused them to cut their way out of their tent and flee the campsite while inadequately dressed for the heavy snowfall and sub-zero temperatures. Now, after the group's bodies were discovered, an investigation by Soviet authorities determined that 6 of them had died from hypothermia, while the other 3 had died by physical trauma. One victim had major skull damage, 2 had severe chest trauma, and another had a small crack in his skull. 4 of the bodies were found lying in running water in a creek, and 3 of those 4 had damaged soft tissue of the head and face. 2 of the bodies had missing eyes, 1 had a missing tongue, and 1 had missing eyebrows. Number 2. Treatment of a patient with mental illness. This 1890 photo depicts a woman forced into a crucifixion pose and facing a wall. The woman is a patient at a mental institution undergoing treatment. Now, believe it or not, forced standing was considered a legitimate part of treatment for mental illness in 19th century Germany. Now, back in the 18th and early 20th century, women were sometimes institutionalized due to their opinions and their inability to be controlled properly by a primarily male-dominated culture. There were financial incentives too, because before the passage language of the Married Women's Property Act 1882, all of a wife's assets pass automatically to her husband. The men who were in charge of these women, either a husband, father, or brother, could send these women to mental institutions, stating they believed that these women were mentally ill because of their strong opinions. These men had the last say when it came to the mental health of these women, so if they believed that these women were mentally ill, or if they simply wanted to silence the voices and opinions of these women, they could easily send them to mental institutions. This is what could have happened to this woman in that photograph. Now, besides standing, practices at these asylums were dark, as they had treatments that included restraints, isolation, electroshock therapy, ice baths, forced drugging, and even lobotomies. And coming in at number 1 is mustard gas tested on American military. Mustard gas is a type of chemical warfare agent, and as a chemical weapon, mustard gas was first used in World War I. In 1943, the US Navy exposed its own sailors to mustard gas. Now, officially, the Navy was testing the effectiveness of new clothing and gas masks against the deadly gas that had proven so terrifying in the First World War. Young men were approached after 8 weeks of boot camp and asked if they wanted to participate in an experiment that would help shorten the war. Obviously, they said yes, but they didn't know what they were signing up for. Only when the boys reached the research laboratory were they told the experiment involved mustard gas. Now, the participants, almost all of whom suffered several external and internal burns, were ignored by the Navy and in some cases were threatened with the Espionage Act. In 1991, the reports were finally declassified and taken before Congress. Well, that's all for our list of disturbing photos from history taken in prohibited places. Which photo freaks you out the most? Let us know in the comments down below, and don't forget to like and subscribe to our page. I'm your host, Emily, and we'll see you next time. Peace.